Thank you. Good morning. Um, and I was just acknowledging that she and I were emailing back and forth about midnight and then at 5 a.m. And so I'm like, oh, I forgot to set up my flip chart easel. And I was like, oh, that's why, because I didn't sleep. It's- so my name is Regina Penny, and I'm the executive director of Nonprofit Network. I've been in the role for 15 years. I started my strategic planning journey uh, around 1999. So I'm coming up, I am 15 years old as a strategic planner. I started in Jackson. Figuring it out. So I've learned a lot along the way. I worked in nonprofit organizations my entire career. I graduated from Bowling Green State University in 91. I started that career at the Northwest Ohio Multiple Sclerosis Society when nonprofits were raising money with a-thons, walk-a-thons, a penny a mile type stuff, and it felt like a penny a mile. And then I worked for a child abuse prevention organization in Washington and then a humane society. So I have a lot of fundraising experience. I've served an organization as their executive director for 15 years. So I am you if you're an executive director. I am you if you're a board member. I am the chair of an almost all volunteer organization struggling to stay afloat and provide good services. And then I'm on the board of a rather large organization, multi-million dollar nonprofit organization. So I've got a lot of tables that I sit at, and I'm excited to be with you today to kind of walk you through a conversation about strategic planning and recognizing that strategic planning is actually should be embedded in everything that you do. And I'll tell you why. We're going to add in some bridges out of poverty and mindsets around being able to foreshadow and predict and plan accordingly. So, as organizations, if we can operate more from a strategic mindset versus a get through the day mindset, will grow and thrive. I wanted to introduce my colleague, Zoe Lyons. Do you want to do your own introduction? Good. I need you.
Do that for you.
Oh, I was going to go, if you could do 90 seconds of an.
I'm Zoe Lyons. I am the newest employee of Nonprofit Network. I've been there for 6 weeks. I recently retired as a county director for the Department of Health Services. Worked in the state of Michigan for 34 years. So this is my encore career. Uh, and I just have become certified as a Bridges Out of Poverty trainer. I am an eighth master trainer at Birch Childhood Experiences. So you can speak to me about either of those things. And I also serve on a board for a federally funded call center. I've been both just a board member, a vice chair, and I'm currently the chair of that organization in Jackson, where we all live. And I'm excited. I asked to come to get an Isarian. Victor, I have a lot. I still need to learn about strategic planning. So I here to both assist and learn alongside of you.
Thank you. I'm going to advance my slide and actually talk a little bit more about Nonprofit Network. How many of you have been in one of our classes before? Oh, good. So a few of you, the rest of you. Nonprofit Network is a capacity building center, which means that we're one of several in the state, but we serve to serve you. We're kind of like a chamber, but a chamber on, speed. Our job is to teach executive directors how to be executive directors and board members how to be board members and allow you to figure out the complexities underneath the umbrella of being a nonprofit. What does your 990 mean? How often should you submit it? What are these questions about on your 990? How do I stay in compliance with the Attorney General here in the state of Michigan? How do I recruit board members? What is a balance sheet? What do these numbers mean on my balance sheet? all of the things that you need to know to run an effective nonprofit organization. We kind of give you the framework and the resources in which to understand all of that. So I'm going to share, thank you so much. I'm going to share our learning objectives today. We're going to talk a lot about vocabulary and the intentionality of the words and how to use the words. We're going to talk about how you need to utilize data in order to inform what you're doing and what you should be doing. And then if you want to use a consultant or a facilitator, the meaning of those two things and how do you utilize an external person to do that work. Spoiler, Nonprofit Network has a large group of consultants that can help you, but there's also a lot of consultants that wouldn't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. There's probably a lot of consultants in your own community. And you need to determine whether or not you need a consultant or a facilitator. So we're going to be talking a lot about that as well. Thank you. So my question to you is I'd like you to introduce yourself, not only to me, but to the room. And then I want to know what you want to learn today. My strategy and my way that I function in workshops is I've got a whole bunch of tools. If none of them are the tools that you actually need, I won't use them. And I'll customize this work in the moment to make sure that your needs are met. So, may I start here?
Yes, my name is Sam Weiser. I am director at the Soldiers at Center near McCare County. And what do I am to learn today? So I am a need fighter. Abu Arban, and I want to learn a little bit more about focusing more on the individual donors. You know what? Sort of making a plan for that.
So you want to create a fundraising strategic plan?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to write is that applying these topics to multiple micro conversations within your organization, micro and macro. Next.
I'm Sheila, and Shanna Henry, and I'm getting Dr. Kia Skylight, Bellingham Retreat Center. And what do I want to learn? Well, I'm a dual executive director. We use so many different things, and we own 200 acres and a lot of buildings, and then a lot of things that we could develop and need to develop. So it's just kind of how to organize your mind in terms of prioritizing what you covered it for, or focusing your board on that.
We'll talk a lot about Covey's quadrants.
So I introduced myself in Boca County Tree Foundation. We are currently working with our board. We adopt our strategic plan in January, so we've been working at this for a few months now. And I have a million things that I want to learn, but one thing that we're always looking at is the role of board versus staff in terms of implementation of the strategic plan, the assignment of goals you guys go there.
Because I know the balance of, you said we got go, yes, you get to that work.
I'm going to talk a lot about that.
My name is Amanda Renes. I am the chairperson of the Marathon Township Parks and Rec Board, and I'm very new at this, so I'm kind of just looking for foundational knowledge.
Okay.
I'm Danielle Bergatti. I'm the director of the Lapeer District Library. And so I've been involved in strategic planning throughout my whole career. But what I'm really looking for is every strategic plan that I've ever done, we've had, reasonable, actionable items for staff and things to do. But how do we look at a strategic plan with bringing in like community input and maybe the people that don't use the library? Like, how do we capture that kind of what are they looking for that will make that eat the library?
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jill Lyons, Executive Director for the Center for the Arts of Greater Lapeer.
And I am here because we do have a strategic plan. We did it when I was brand new baby executive director. It is coming to the end. And when I mention that to my board, they go, oh, I
need to get my board on board for this.
Okay. So, I'm not going to write down ways to make it fun, but I want to. Well, I think that's but there is a way to effectively utilize the resources in the room. And I'll talk a lot about why everyone dreads strategic planning. And a lot of times um, I'll get to the whole list, but nothing is matched appropriately, right? The strategy, the design of the process doesn't meet the needs of the organization, right? So how do we know that it's going to be an engaging, interactive ideation versus a horrendous task of laundry, right? So I'll write engaging process. Excellent. Sir.
My name is Warren Short. I'm the founder and the CEO of Short's Fire and Rescue. We're about 4 years old at this point, and my answer to your question is D, all of the above.
All of the above. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you.
Paul Ullman, I'm Emeritus Board Member of the Foundation and also a member of the Family Literacy Board. I'm here just to refresh all my Tupi plate. Done it many years, just like refresh.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Mary Shelton, and I'm Executive Director at Geeks Literacy Center. And we have a strategic plan that was not highly gauged to afford the number. It was scattered. And so we have a new efforts that we're doing where we're trying to get word more balls that we're kind of stall at BDSU, move forward and figure out what we're doing. With that current place, we're not moving forward. I guess part of it is that rank up higher degrees at board and Walset, but it's really hard for me to say that because I pre-board.
So I'm going to say in parentheses and then just say invigorate. You're going to have a great day.
I'm Linda Cavanier. I'm a board member of the Family Literacy Center, so we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you.
I am Robert. I am the Administrative Program Specialist at the Living Literacy Center. And I put some roles in here. I put my intro, so call. I want to make sure that the script makes doing my keys overall.
Perfect. Okay. Good.
I'm Liz. I'm a board member at Family Literacy. And what Mary said, we're trying to get involved at dans survey guess EY baby.
Yeah. Okay. So more engagement generally. Good morning.
Sorry, late.
You're all right.
And I would Sister House, I'm the founder and president on the NAPO biz for
Our woman report.
Awesome. What do you hope to learn today?
For me, it's a lot. Everything's taken. Again, I'm going along at just some basic comments of this.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a lot about multiple applications of planning processes, right? And it's going to be a great day. So tell me what your experience has been with strategic planning up until this point. Sorry, let me get my flip chart out of the way. Can you resonate with any of those pictures?
I feel like okay, people or other people that come in, they want anything that you already plan. Like, yeah, like that I'll leave people plan.
Yeah. Yeah. There's what you may be referring to, and check me, is that there's experts in the room, there's program design, there's data and research that you're using. And so part of it might be a communication, like how do we train organizations to talk about the work that we do and make connections. A story I want to share is that I was working with a domestic violence shelter, and they said they had been talking about trauma-informed care for like the last 5 years. And the executive director was like, no, I've said it, 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 I've said it. And yet, during the strategic planning process, when we were talking about capital improvements, there was like multiple light bulbs that went off in the room when the executive director said, but we have to invest in changing our communal bathrooms. Our shelter residents have one bathroom. You know, looks like a locker room. When we're talking about trauma-informed care and people who have been, you know, abused in multiple ways, a communal bathroom is not trauma-informed, right? And all of the board members went, oh, right? So there's a huge communication conversation we need to have in a strategic planning process and ongoing to rely on the experts and make sure that those dots are connected. So it's a valid conversation, and to remember how smart we are in our own little silo. And in a strategy session, how do we share that education to help design a future path? Somebody else, what's been your experience with strategic planning? Obviously staff-led, right? That this group of people kind of figured it out. And
Outside presenter that several years ago that really energized us, and everything has been wonderful. And
okay.
I think a lot of times breaking that enthusiasm, what you put into those actionable items that make sense to everybody. You know, we have grand visions, like we want to do this, but you know, those little baby steps that it takes to get there, sometimes you lose that, and once you lose that enthusiasm, you're like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So even an opportunity to map the path. Here's the strategy, here's the goal, here's the tactic. We completed the tactic, which means we made it 25% toward our goal, toward this strategy, right? From a leadership, both board and staff leadership perspective, constantly share the map of where we are, where we've been, the mile marker that we're on, and the recognition that, oh, we ran into construction, right? We might have to divert. We might have to take a detour. Is the ultimate path still our desired state? So that communication, like how do we apply and implement all of these pieces and keep them together throughout the entire plan? Wait, sir.
So you kind of hit the nail on the head for me when you used that for a locker room example. From what I'm gathering now, you go to first look at where each person's coming from. In that case, somebody was looking at it from a money standpoint. Another person's looking at it from a person standpoint. You got to get everybody on the same page. But then if you take the strategy and lay it out like you mentioned, that kind of makes it visual for everybody so they can all see and all get on the same page.
Exactly.
That helps a lot.
And we sometimes get into the rut where, and I just did it to you, I'm nodding. And so you're like, oh, I don't have to finish the sentence. She gets me, right? And yet the sentence you were going to complete was going to completely rock my world, right? And so speaking in complete sentences, a strategic planning process allows for a complete conversation and to ensure that I have understanding. Now, ma'am.
I think part of the problem with OG plan is that the scale of the plan, because it addresses so many different aspects of the program. It's not one thing, it's not 10 things, it's all the things. You don't have a good plan for how you focus it in, because everything.
Yep. Yep. And what's the appropriate conversation with the appropriate people, right? From the one chair that I sit in as executive director, you get to see the entire landscape. You know what you planted, the seeds that have been planted that haven't come up. You know what the weather forecast is. You know the flight patterns of the jets flying back and forth, right? And so to be in the right room with the right people and not be talking to pilots about seeds and seeds to the pilots, right? Like all of that, it's a from a the facilitator and implementer of the plan, which is an executive director's role, right? To make sure I don't drag my board members into a staff meeting and I don't drag program staff into a conversation about our 10-year vision, right? And so one, it's what's my filter? The people in this room, right? Like have the right conversation at the right time in the appropriate phase, right? So there's a whole bunch of like, oh, got it. No staff meetings at board meetings.
I agree with what Harry's saying. That's exactly what I was thinking. Is we started the meeting to do strategic planning, and it was like sporal. The one person says something, and now we have 16 more things that could go along with that, or we branched out. I think we're looking too big to size.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will help you with that. Anyone else want to share their experience with strategic planning?
Being very new at this, as soon as I began my position, I went in to try to lead the board, and I lost a few board numbers real quick because I was trying to bring in, and it was like mid-year, and I guess what I want to say is timing. So I'm new. It's the middle of the year. Board members are in the middle of what they understood, which was previous leadership, and I dared try to change things up a little bit. And it was good that I lost those board members because I think, I have to lead in the way that I am going to, whether learning or awesome. But I think that was a big learning curve for me. Is I was trying to go broad, and I did not like what I saw. So I tried to shift some things, and then right away got rid of a few people in the room that were going to make my job really hard, and that worked. And now I'm going forward, and I might be able to do strategic planning, but at that point, I just had to move. Like you said, get the right people in the room.
And be willing to a strategic planning process is a deep, complex conversation, right? About where you are intending to go. It allows people to go, oh, that's not what I signed up for, right? It's an evolutionary process, which allows some people to go, like, we don't want Sisyphus, right? So everybody know what who Sisyphus is? It's that god who happened to have the affair with another god's wife. And that god said, in perpetuity, you will take this huge boulder and you will roll it up a hill. And when you get to the top of the hill, you get to go to sleep. And when you wake up, the boulder is at the bottom of the hill. And that was in perpetuity, right? So we don't want that day. We don't want to do the same thing over and over again without feeling like there's any progress. But some board members get to say, I got the boulder up And now we have another hill to climb, but I've done my work here. And how do we create an evolutionary system where the organization gets to grow without keeping the size of the board members that are currently there or the staff, right? As an executive director, this is an introspection of, am I making my organization my size that's comfortable for me? And if I am not comfortable with the size it should be, how do I allow for growth and evolution in that perspective? Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. So let's talk about why planning processes fail. So one of the things that you've already mentioned is we don't actually know what's realistic. And when we have these big, huge, audacious ideas, we don't actually check ourselves and say, is that actually realistic to accomplish in the next 5 years? How do we take our current reality with our desired state and make sure that it will match? So clear communication, understanding the community trends, understanding all of the unknowns, right? We're about to enter into a season, don't know how long that season's going to last, but a season where there's going to be massive fluctuation in federal policy that's going to come down, right? How does that impact you? We can look at 2017 and 2018 and we can make some guesses. We can certainly make some guesses about, things that are being said, but we don't know. Nobody knows, right? How do you do a strategic plan in a time of true uncertainty about the impacts to communities? So the strategic plan has to allow for some fluctuations. So we don't actually recognize what is going to be realistic, and how do we incorporate changes in our community and other stresses, economic stresses, community conditions, all of those things. The other thing that makes a strategic plan fail is we don't challenge our own assumptions, right? Well, we've always done it that way, and this is the only way that's going to work. And so we will continue to operate in this way, and we will protect this, versus allowing a process to kind of challenge the way we do our work and how it might evolve. We don't have the right people in the room. So this is the conversation that we actually are trying to work on an operational plan, and we're calling it a strategic plan, right? We're working on a plan that's going to get us through the next 12 months about how to make a program more efficient. That's not a 5-year strategic plan. That's an operational plan and might even be a program plan. So when we think about our policies, when we think about the authority that the executive director has and how many staff they have, the evolution of our board, whether it's working, whether it's governing, do we have the right people in the room having the right conversation? If you're talking about program amendments with board members, it might not be an appropriate conversation, right? We have to check that assumption on us. We aren't at the correct elevation. We're talking about planting seeds, nurturing worms, right? Watering the grass when we should be in a plane looking at the landscape of the entire organization. And so we have to check where we should be to determine what kind of plan we need, right? And then there's a disconnect between the plan and the capacity for change. One of the things in a strategic planning process is if some organizations, again, we just get through the day. Every single person is doing 3 jobs, right? There is so much going on, and all we do, we're on a gerbil wheel, we're sprinting every single day. And you, ma'am, are asking me to put more on my plate without taking anything off? I don't know about that. And I think things are fine, right? Why do we need a strategic plan if I think everything that's happening today is just fine, right? So there's this disconnect about this inspirational future vision and how we arrive there, and whether or not I can take anything off my plate to even have brain space to think differently. And when we start adding all of these things up, a strategic plan with overworked, underpaid, exhausted staff, right? You're going to get is there any way that we can click less buttons in order to get this report done? And that conversation does not belong at the board level, right? So how do we have the right conversation in the right room with the right people? And then we don't actually make a full plan. We talk about a lot of things, but we don't decide how it's going to be used and monitored and applied. It's like, here you go. Here's your plan. Here's your goal. Go meet it. Talk to me in a year, right? And then we forget about it because we didn't actually monitor it. And if we're supposed to check back in a year and nothing's been done, then why would we bring it up? Executive directors, why would we bring that up, right? So we've got to figure out how to utilize it and monitor it. And then the other thing that might cause a strategic plan to fail is the wrong time horizon. Can we think about 5 years from now? Is that the appropriate time horizon for this plan? Or is it 18 months? Is it 24 months? Is it 10 years? How do we know it's the right future vision? And I think for many small organizations who haven't been around that long, to make a plan for longer than you've been in existence is probably the wrong time horizon, right? That the longer you're around, the longer you can learn how to predict into the future. The less time you can say, I've been around for 2 years. I probably shouldn't have a 5-year plan, right? So all of those things need to be incorporated into your process and into your decision-making design before you start the process. You should go through and identify these pieces in your planning process. The other thing that I want to share is that some people think that a strategic plan can get done in a Saturday between 8 and 12, right? There's a few things that can get done between 8 and 12. There might be some problem solving, but when we really think about a planning process, a true planning process with stakeholder engagement, discerning that information, getting the staff engaged in vetting the goals to determine if they're realistic, allowing the board to really understand those strategies. Some of you are thinking about a year-long process, not a morning process. And so again, we have to recognize that if you're just going to get together for the morning, that is probably a strategic conversation. It's not going to produce a strategic plan unless you create all of the implements around all of the other things, right? So if I were your facilitator in that process and you told me, listen, my board has a tolerance for 3 hours on a Saturday. That's it. They got nothing left to give me. Then we would design a process that's appropriate for that, recognizing that the bulk of the work would land on the staff, that we would incorporate micro conversations during board meetings, but we would design the path for that. So again, I'm going to talk a lot about this, but what are your inputs in anything? What are the inputs that you have available to get an output to reach your desired outcome? And everything in life is a logic model. Everything. So really understanding all of those elements are going to be important for your success. What questions do you have so far?
I had a big category, and the first one I did, it structure is like with the time, like the rep called the, but then you have people that they say like they'll pop about something like totally different, like or something like 10 years down the road or expanding or output a book, like you know what I'm being there.
Yeah. You've got people at your board meeting that want to have a different conversation than what's on the agenda, right? And so again, the clarification of the roles and the responsibilities, and if this person is like, but when are we talking about that, right? So having, again, from recognizing that most things in life are a micro or a macro strategic plan, right? Getting from point A to B. How are we going to do that? And making sure that the right people are on the bus in the right seats. So that conversation is, I would love to have that conversation with you. This is the agenda at hand. I think you're asking for a place on a future agenda to talk about that. That's an excellent point, would be how I would handle that. Anything else? All right. All right, so let's talk about preparing the conversations that we have leading up to a strategic planning process. And so one of them is, how do we create space for different thinking? And that might be a staff conversation, right? The staff would say, or executive director would lead conversations around, where are we not quite as efficient as we need to be? Efficiency conversations are not strategic planning conversations. They're efficiency conversations, right? So programmatically, what are our strengths and weaknesses in working together? What are the opportunities that a program has to be more efficient so that there isn't so much on staff members' plates? So this first conversation is, what do we need to stop doing and how do we make room for change? That is completely an operational question, right? Your board will follow the lead. If you need to stop, like restructure your board meetings so you're not doing program updates and having strategic conversations, your board can learn how to do that, right? But your staff need to first make room for different kinds of thinking. If your staff, if your operations cannot make room for anything new or anything different, your plan will fail. So first conversation, how do we make room for change? Second conversation is, what is the role of board and staff in the strategic planning process? And we're going to talk a lot about your continuum of where you are between a working board and a governing board. But you have to decide, are board members program deliverers? A lot of grassroots organizations, you have board members that are doing the work. So are they considered staff in that conversation? Are they considered a governor, like an oversight? Like, what's the role of the board? What's the role of a working board? What's the role of a governing board? And making sure that everybody knows their lane in the conversation. And then the last conversation is, how do staff inform strategies without bringing the entire strategic planning discussion and transforming it into a staff meeting, right? So if everyone needs to inform it, how do I inform it appropriately? How does the board inform it appropriately? These are key and critical conversations to prepare you for a strategic planning process. This is not a strategic planning process. What questions or ahas are you having so far?
So, in our policies as a summer camp, if someone on the staff has a problem with any of the other staff, they're meant to come to the executive director. If any of the staff have problems with the executive directors, our policy says to go to the chair of the board.
Oh, so that happened.
Good. Okay. It's a good policy, meaning not that it's good that it's
The
happening.
president of the board is really thrown off and really bothered by it.
Because it was bringing him into the weeds. Yeah, he'd never get brought into the weeds before. So I guess I would like to hear thoughts on that.
So in terms of the appropriate roles and responsibilities, did the grievance process, so you have a single line that says, if you've got a problem with me, here's your compliance officer if I'm not the compliance officer.
Yeah.
Do you have any policy or procedure about the then what?
No.
So the then what is, okay, the executive or the board chair has received this, and how do they know that it's a legitimate grievance versus a staff member that doesn't like being told to come to work on time, right? So what are the litmus tests, and what are the questions, and what's the appropriate action of the board chair? So what you brought up is a really important conversation for all of us is, I know theoretically what my role is, but I don't know specifically, right? And so now I've been given a responsibility and a burden to bear, and I have no idea. It's heavy. I have no idea when I can let it down, and I have no idea what to do with it, but stand here and be frustrated that I don't know what I'm carrying. And so a lot of the time we have to have the full conversation, which says if you get a grievance from a staff member that isn't an allegation of embezzlement, right? It isn't an allegation of illegal activity, right? So where it gets to be gray is is the executive director being charged with discrimination or wrongful termination, right? Okay, all of those things are in. So now what do I do as chair? The first question I have is, have you talked to your executive director about this? Check, check. Yes, and it wasn't resolved. Amazing. Okay. So, okay, now I know what to do. And then I know how to investigate a real thing. And I know when to bring it to the board. And I know when to have a closed session to actually talk about this thing appropriately versus this is a really heavy rock. Make sense? Yeah. So, in a beautiful, there's sun out there, in a beautiful sunny day, we write policies using okay, let's talk about what we're going to do in a hurricane or a tornado. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? What are we going to bring with us? Right? What's appropriate act? What's inappropriate? We have those conversations so when it actually happens, we have a list of protocols to follow. Helpful?
Yeah.
And that same conversation needs to be applied over and over and over and over again in multiple areas regarding the tasks of the board, right, in building a budget. What am I supposed to do with the budget again, right? How do we build the budget? Who builds the budget? And the budget is a strategic plan, right? Make sense? Questions or comments about that? Any other ahas? Okay, so how long does the preparation take, do you think? How long will it take you to determine the answers to these questions?
Depends on the size of the organization.
Right. Where does change most need to occur? Absolutely. Smaller organizations, okay, we get it, right? You would identify in a mostly grassroots, volunteer-led, where's our burnout currently, right? How frustrated are board members with our board meetings that go on for 4 hours, right? Like, is the strategic planning process actually going to give us enough information to reduce board meeting time because we're having better, more important, more structured conversation, right? So what do we need to, just that conversation, where are we with burnout? Where are we with capacity? What are we doing right? What do we need to fix? And for some of you, before you start a strategic planning process, this conversation might take you a year to resolve. Many of you, without this conversation, will simply start a process that will be incredibly frustrating because there is no capacity for change and you haven't asked the important conversations, and your strategic planning process will then address burnout, not a vision. Does that make sense? Okay.
It depends on, like, I'm thinking of our own board. You know, the process we're doing right now is really, we do a 3-year strategic plan, which is a realistic plan that we know that we can monitor, and it's, adaptable. And we're not having just, there's something as stretch goals and then there's defeaty goals that you're going to make. But for this cycle, it was more of an update of what we ever had. So I call it strategic planning light. And then the next cycle is when we're saying, okay, we're kind of ready for the overhaul.
Yep.
But it's made a big difference too on the longevity of the board members.
Yep.
So if you're bringing people along that have been part of your organization for a long time, they have that institutional knowledge.
Yep.
As opposed to now we had a lot of turnover board and you're trying to get them up to speed of the organization.
Yep. You're also referring to what is the conversation we need to have, right? Is the conversation we need to have affirming the current path we're on, whether or not we have an existing strategic plan or not? Are we affirming our path and how we might get deepen our impact, like just a little bit farther on the road than we've been getting? Like, let's be a little bit more aggressive. That's one conversation. The complete redesign, innovation, creativity, like we've got to like we're in a place now that we could do amazing things. Let's break the mold and decide what's best for us. Let's dump it all out and have a complete evaluation of what we could be doing differently, right? That's a completely different process, right? So that when we get to, and I told you, everything's a logic model. What are the inputs that we have? One of those inputs is capacity. One of those inputs is the expertise of the staff. One of those inputs are going to be an engaged or disengaged board, right? But we're getting to the outcome. And is the outcome a revisit and an affirmation? Is the outcome a complete revamp of how we're doing every single thing we're doing? What is the outcome that we're looking for? And some of you are stopping here. I want a strategic plan, not actually communicating this. So those input models, and we're going to, there's a handout on your table, and we're going to do a little bit of work about around inputs where you're actually going to be able to think about what you have to contribute to a strategic plan. And for those of you that went to the board governance workshop, this is how I told you to think about your agendas, right? Everything is a logic model. What do I want? What do I want? What is it going to look like? Versus, can I check a box? And if we go this way, what do I want? What do I need to include in order to get there, to get a vote that gets me to an engaged board? Make sense? AHA is about a logic model. Do you use a logic model in your grant applications? Yeah. United Way does too, and I know you love them. They're amazing, but they're so cool. If we begin, that was sarcastic. I know you don't love them. I'm telling you, they're amazing. If you can reframe the way you think about it, because it will actually get you to impact versus tasks. So, verbalize right now at your tables, what is it that you want from your strategic plan? What's your outcome of a strategic plan? Take about 5 minutes. All right, complete your thought. Somebody share your outcome. What's your desired outcome?
Greater impact in the community.
Greater impact in the community. Excellent.
Diversify our funding.
Diversify your funding. So I'm going to rephrase that, right? A sustainable organization, right? Because diversifying funding would be a goal, not even a strategy, right?
Okay, so we are federally funded people recently started, and it's up the air right now.
Yep.
We don't know what. How do you grow? How do you get creative? How do you do more?
Yep.
Without knowing.
Without knowing. Yep. But I wanted you to hear how I rephrased it, right? Again, using language to put you at the right elevation. Diversifying funding is a goal toward a strategy of a sustainable organization. We'll get into language. Someone else, what's your outcome?
I think that we're starting to say our plan is all the same instead of trying to focus on smaller stuff.
So it feels overwhelming. So your outcome is feeling less overwhelmed. Perfect. Someone else, what's your outcome? Feeling less overwhelmed. So, so having like being able to prioritize, we talked about it. Like, what is important right now? So your outcome is not chasing the rabbits, being incredibly mindful and intentional about where you spend your resources and your energy. It's a great outcome. Very different than a strategic plan if you were just stop there, right? Because you've got to lead to your intention, which is a strategic plan could tell you all of the things you could do, not should do, right? You could have a strategic planning process that's like, look at the world. Let's conquer the world. That does not feel less overwhelming, right? So if the intention is to be more deliberate and intentional, to feel less overwhelmed, we design a strategic plan that gets you there. Make sense? Okay. So let's talk about vocabulary. There is a lot of, this is how the order of the things that I do. When you talk to different strategic planners, they may put goals in front of strategies. I'm not even going to confuse you with somebody else's language. You're in my room, my language. Got it? All right. So here are the essential elements that guide your strategic planning process. The first one is, do you have a strong, clear, agreed upon mission, which is an understanding of why you exist? The next one is a vision. We understand how what we do works in the world and how we contribute to a better community, society, population, whatever, right? Our mission and our vision. We understand that we have values in which we will behave, right? So one of the values is, sure, fawns are wildlife, but they're really important. They have a value in our society, right? So that's inherent in your mission and vision, but there's some value elements in there that need to be very clear. So education is part of the values that you're going to always share that information. So mission, vision, values. And then you get to strategies. Strategies are identifying where you're going and your approach in getting there. So I have a couple of examples. Every single one of your strategic plans, because you're a nonprofit, needs to address financial stability, financial growth, financial reconstruction, whatever that is. But a strategy would be financial growth and then a definition of what that word, those two words mean to you. We will have enough money to pay our staff competitive wages, to reinvest in our programs, and to manage any crisis that might come our way. That's our definition of financial growth. Some of you, and I heard some of you talk about infrastructure. Our strategy is infrastructure. Well, what's your desired state from that strategy? What does it really mean to you to have the appropriate infrastructure? So the definition. Then you have goals. We are going to grow financially. Well, how are you going to do that? What are the goals to get you to your strategy? So if we're going to have financial growth, we need to diversify our revenue, right? That's income. We need to manage our expenses, right? We need to create a donor program, whatever those goals are, SMART goals, but you've got your mission, vision, values, strategies, goals, and then, okay, you're going to diversify funding streams. Tell me exactly what you're going to do for that. We're going to hire a grant writer, right? We're going to, I don't necessarily recommend a tactic that says we're going to apply for 15 grants, because You could apply for one for the same amount as 15 and you've diversified your funding strategies, but you get the point, right? You're going from macro to micro. Why we exist, what happens when we achieve that goal, how do we operate, what are the things that we will hold dear, what are the strategies, 4, 5, not too many, what are the goals that are going to get us to those strategies, and then what are the tactics that we need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to achieve that goal. Many times your strategies will stay evergreen for 10 years. We will always need to grow financially, or we're going to maintain our financial health, whatever that means, right? The goals to do that might change over the years. So if you have 5-year themes that you revisit every 2.5 years, you're like, we accomplished that goal. Still means that that strategy is healthy and well and needs to be maintained. Does that make sense to you? Okay. All right, so the first conversation we're going to have is whether or not you can measure your mission. This is going to be brain work because many of you will point to your programs and say, I can measure our programs. Most of you have never measured your mission. Okay, does that make sense? You've decided what programs would accomplish your mission, but you've never decided or determined how you might measure your mission. So there's a couple of different missions up here. One, this is a National Humane Society, I think. Work to end animal suffering. How do you know you've done that? I want you to think about your own mission. How do you know that you have ended animal suffering? They should be able to measure it. You're going to be able to, I'm going to see this. This is going to be evidence. American Cancer Society. We're going to improve the lives of people with cancer and their families through research, advocacy, and patient support. How will they know that they've improved lives?
Show the numbers on the research and some actual factors.
They should define what improvement looks like for people with cancer, right? And then make sure that all their programs do that. Instead of going, maybe rides to doctor's appointments would be helpful, right? But without the measurement, you don't know. Last one, to achieve racial justice, equality, and an inclusive society. How do you know that's occurring? How do you know that that is being successful? Again, many of us take a mission and then build programs off that mission without ever having defined the actual mission, ever having to lift up. There is an organization, I pick on them all the time. They don't invite me back anymore. So their mission is to inspire the love of reading in middle school students. How would they measure that? How would they know that's occurring? Guess what their program is? They drop books off at middle schools. Huh. Right? How'd they get there? How did they get there? And so there's this huge gap. Maybe it's not a gap at all. Right? Inspire the love of reading in middle school students. What's the program and how would they prove the impact here? Right? So Nancy, you were like, our strategic plan would be increasing impact. How do you know that impact is being made? So, when we talk about the mission of your organization, and I've got a tool for you. It's this strategic planning worksheet. I want you, and I've got an example, couple of examples. I want you to write your mission down, and then I want you to define every single word, not Webster's definition, your definition, every single word in your mission. Hopefully your mission is not 3 paragraphs. If it is, take the most important sentence, and then talk to me about how to revise your mission statement. But for example, in the other slide, it says work to end animal suffering. Well, what is and isn't our work? If that's your mission statement, what is the work that ends animal suffering and what isn't? Have you all determined that as an organizational strategy? What is end? End animal suffering. Have we decided on how euthanasia, for example, would be part of an end to animal suffering or not? Right? So there's huge philosophical conversations in there that need to be codified within our work. Define animal, define suffering, right? So if we identify some really deep, intentional words within our mission statement, it will help guide our strategic plan and our program design. So I want you to, this is should be a group exercise with your entire board. You're going to practice for 3 minutes. Take one word in your mission statement and deeply define it here. This is a conversation I want you to take back to your organization as homework. So 3 minutes, 10:14, at 10:17, I'm going to stop you because you're just practicing. Okay, your 3 minutes are up. You're practicing. Share what word you were working on.
You don't see. No one knew the bishop. Judy, is prop, and because of some keywords of the define and how important it is to talk about that. Permission and building spoke and reaching like Drew or appear come around there. So you talked about building, you talked about skills, you talked about literacy, you temper land.
But a truly impactful, valuable conversation, right? In the 3 minutes, right? So even to say surrounding counties, surrounding area, where do you stop, right? Like what arms do you have? So, but that's a true conversation, and I think in like one of the things is what are we pushing back on? And you just identified. I don't mean to pick on you. I apologize. Namaste, right? Is you'll go where anybody takes you. That's not strategic. So, but you probably haven't spoken that clearly to your board and define that geographic area of where you will and won't go and why, right? And so, right.
You have your we're not.
So so you just identified your capacity right now. And what if your capacity grew? Would you go into Genesee County? There is some really key strategic conversations about, did you decide this or did our size decide this? And when we think about growth and strategy, is one of our strategies to get into Genesee County? And if the answer is no, you've defined a focus area, right? Or no, not right now. And so there's some really cool, critical conversations that if you were to define, have a flip chart in your strategic planning what does surrounding area mean to us? And to asterisk, this is temporary because we actually have a plan to take over the world, right? And if that's your plan, then that guides those decisions. Then you're playing chess, right? So many of you, for example, might have in your mission statement all, and I bet you've never challenged it, right?
Yeah. It's weird good they had a board numbers. Now, one that he had a board number during our strategic planning
So there's always that financial burden, right?
Yep.
And their question was, are we just looking for growth to grow? Like, we have an endowment, like, how much money do you need? And why is our purpose? And it was a good challenge of why do we want to keep growing?
Right.
And what would we do with it?
Yep.
As opposed to just having a grow your endowment where, we can say, oh, what was the quality of life, but what does that mean?
So, and I'm going to have this conversation with you, but it resonates with any nonprofit organization trying to solve a problem. You don't have enough money to solve the problem that you want to solve. Right? But what else do you have? When we think about our logic model, what other inputs do we have? Our input are power and influence. We have a sphere of influence. We have people that know legislators. We have people that could solve other problems if we taught them how to solve the problem, right? And so money is not the end all be all. You have to manage it, you have to grow it, but that's never gonna solve your problem. No foundation is ever gonna have enough money to solve the problems they wanna solve.
You can't grant your way out of it.
You can't grant your way out of it, right? You can't grant your way to to mission achievement. So if that's a recognition, then what other inputs do we have to accomplish what we want to accomplish, right? And so if we have again, let's think about now the ideation. We do want to serve Genesee County, but we don't have the resource to do it, but we have the curriculum to do it that we could sell.
I'm gonna read my mission, and I feel like our vision completely match. But anyway, so it's to reduce the trauma to children during the investigation and intervention of sexual or physical abuse through advocacy, education, intervention, and treatment. So I picked up the word trauma because you want to reduce their trauma, but our vision is to end child abuse. But it's so hard because I never thought of how would you measure your mission, because how do you end child abuse? You know what I mean? But we're trying to reduce their trauma during this custody.
Well, you've just identified possibly one of your issues, right? Is that the intentionality of your mission is post-trauma. And unless your mission actually led you to any prevention efforts, how would you even begin to end child abuse? Is that what you're doing? But so again, who are we and why do we exist? What's the lane we've created for ourselves? Is it appropriate, right? And what isn't our lane? Great strategic conversations, right? And for some of you, if you just had this conversation in a longer board meeting, maybe a longer couple board meetings, you would transform the way you're thinking for a little bit before you would even need to engage in strategies because you've just redefined yourself. Make sense? Okay. So now, again, your homework is to actually do this, whether as an isolated on your couch, in your PJs, with pads of paper, I don't know what, group activity, staff activity, you need to do this. And you probably would be very surprised that your staff would identify and define your mission very differently than your board.
I try to do something to that. Have a mission, but for some reason nobody could understand what we did. But it's
I didn't hear the last word.
But I tried to
like I did some example mission statements because a lot of the members, they were unclear of actually what we did or what the mission was for Sister House, and it's like it cast like I thought distracted up with different ones, and and I still didn't get a good a response like, okay, this is it. So I am up in the air about the mission because there's like 15 that gets abused to people, and it's just so I guess what I'm going to try.
So what you're saying to me is that as part of your strategic planning session, you really need to settle on who it is, on why you exist, right? And if you can, and many people their mission do not actually answer the question of why we exist, right? AI is great for some things, might not be great for creating a mission statement, but you need to, and your team, whoever your team is, really need to answer the question using as many words as you need to in the beginning. Why do we exist? What is the problem that this organization is supposed to be solving? And that will help you, because without understanding your mission, you won't be able to actually map program toward that mission, right? So here is an example of once we truly understand and have defined every single word within our mission, then we decide programs. Again, this would be an operational conversation. In many rooms, depending on your governance structure, your board would never determine programming. The experts in your field would determine how to deliver your programs. What programs are necessary, what programs are most impactful. For many of you, this would be information you deliver to your board. Here's the programs that we're doing because we've used all the research to determine that when we want to do this within our sector, we do this. Make sense? So if we truly understand what our mission is, work to end animal suffering, then we can figure out what programs will meet that measurement of success. Does that make sense?
So quickly, our mission is to provide compassionate healing care to sick, injured, and orphan fawns and educate an educational opportunity. That's the mission. Our vision, on the other hand, is no fawn left to die alone and scared. My question is something that you know is never going to happen. There's always going to be fawn somewhere that's going to die alone and scared. Is that wrong to have as your mission? That's your ultimate goal?
As your vision.
Yes.
So typically when we think about vision, we know that it is not our work alone, right? So again, whether your vision is that no fawn will ever be left alone, then you're certainly saying, man, as a hunter, all of the hunting community needs to know what to do when they find a fawn, right? Like it's not just you can't do it alone. Same concept as you don't have enough money, right? So you want to end child abuse? It's not your work alone, right? There's multiple organizations that need to be working in with that same intent and purpose, even if they're not working in child abuse. The food pantries need to, like, you know that they're part of that purpose and structure, right? So it's okay that you can't accomplish your vision as long as you recognize that you cannot do it in isolation. So your mission is, why do you exist? What are you doing about the problem? The vision is, how are we collectively engaging in the problem? Does that make sense? Okay. So again, from a strategy perspective, some of you might go, okay, I'm a humane society or an animal care. My mission is to work to end animal suffering, and I don't have any trainers to train dog obedience that would allow a dog to stay in a house with kids. Like, I don't know how to do that. That's okay. You don't have to do everything. You would take this list of how you would actually achieve your mission, prioritize that, focus efforts on that, and create programs around achieving your mission, which would also cause you to constantly evaluate whether or not that program is getting you there, right? So what happens if I provide dog obedience classes and nobody shows up? Is that an effective use of my time? Over and over and over again, I can't find anybody to show up, but man, that is what we're doing, right? I don't care what the community is telling me that they don't want it, I'm doing it, right? Okay, so reevaluate that. That is not an effective strategy to achieve our mission. Some of us will say, listen, education programs on how to take care of animals. I have 50 people that show up to that. I'm in a school auditorium. I provide pizza. I need 200 pizzas every single time we do this. I do all my dog and pony show, and those folks walk out, but I have no idea if they learned anything. I don't evaluate. I don't test. It's just a fun night, free pizza. I can gauge how many people attended that education class, but I actually don't know if it's meeting my mission. So that constant evaluation, the feedback loops, whether it's pre and post surveys, whether it's tests, whether it's something to determine whether or not that program is meeting our mission. From a strategy sense, why am I making you evaluate your programs? Why am I making you go through this conversation? Because it's part of a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? And what are our threats? Okay, we have 500 people coming to a workshop. Currently, those 500 people are not learning a thing, right? But we can do an amendment to that program. Our opportunity is how do we have more impact with that program? Because everything else is working about it. How do we adjust that? Does that make sense? And it could be we need a different facilitator. We need a different curriculum. But part of this conversation is what are our strengths? Lots of people, lots of opportunity. What are our weaknesses? No impact is being done, right? And the threat is people will stop showing up because they didn't learn anything.
So you can apply that to
Anything.
what we do or what I do. This is not we yet, but it's going to be what I do every time we do a fundraiser. We reflect back, say, okay, what did we do? How did we do? What could we do better? That kind of thing. Operationally, how many funds did we take in? How many died? How many survived? What could we do better? What do we need? So we do reflection on everything.
Everything. So if we go back to this logic model philosophy, what were the inputs? The inputs were people, pizza, a room, somebody that said they were training, bad curriculum, right? Whatever it was, that was our inputs. What were our outputs? Well, our desired output was that people would receive training. Right now, they're just getting pizza, right? And then can we determine whether or not the desired outcome of better animal owners, more learned animal owners occurred? Make sense? And we do that every time. What are we trying to accomplish and how do we get there? Okay. So inputs could be board members with relationships, people that know people. It could be money, like from an organizational standpoint, from a program standpoint, like we can do this everywhere and test whether or not we're getting our desired outcome. Make sense? Okay. Okay. So then, so all of this stuff is the SWOT analysis. Typical term that you use in strategic planning all the time. What are our strengths, right? So sometimes our strengths, when I'm in rooms, when we're talking about strengths and assets, people are like, oh, we have really great board members. Okay, think bigger. Where is your power as a organizational strength? So we have reserves to use. We have 18 months of reserves that we're sitting and hoarding because we fear spending it. That's an asset. Fear is a weakness, right? We have a solid, committed team. We actually have the right people hired that can do amazing work. They're experts in their field. They're respected. They have relationships. We have the expertise that we need. We have the efficacy that we need. We have a great reputation, and we know it. We can prove it. It's not just, I have a great reputation, right? In this room, by myself, my reputation is stellar, right? I'm actually testing it. And we have the ability to rely on partners. When we ask our partners for something, they show up. We never ask them for anything, right? We don't actually know what to ask them for, but we know that they'd come if we called. Weaknesses. We don't have any physical space to expand. Board committees are not effective. Relationships with local officials, not very good, right? They won't pick up the phone. So when we start talking about this, now we're talking about what our inputs are, right? These are all inputs. Our strengths and our weaknesses. Strengths and weaknesses are the inputs to get our outcomes, or our outputs to get our outcomes. Okay, so we're having really deep conversations. If you have a board that does not have the tolerance for a long strategic planning session, this is a conversation that you could have at a board meeting. But make it deep, right? You don't want, this isn't a 5-minute conversation. You don't want this to be a 5-minute conversation. What truly are our strengths, what truly are our weaknesses, and how are we currently using them? Make sense? And then we go to opportunities and weaknesses. So our opportunities is when we mapped our mission, or mapped our programs to mission, we found a whole bunch of new programs that we should be doing that would be more impactful than what we're currently doing. That's a great opportunity. Partnerships with the local high school, new space options. We don't currently have any geography to expand to, but we know of some. We could utilize other spaces for programs. If we got out of our head that everybody has to come to us, we could start going to them, right? So, and we have the capability to invest in mission. Our threats, dramatic policy changes at the federal level. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if we're going to lose money. We don't know what's going to happen to our, we have got nothing, right? We don't know the consequences. We don't know if state funding is going to decrease as a result of federal funding, how long that process is going to take. We don't know what our community conditions are going to be this year. And our executive director has a retirement plan. So in the midst of all of this, we also need a succession plan. Okay? So we get to really map these out and incorporate our opportunities and our threats in a strategic planning process. You could be talking about these 4 things, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, over 4 different board meetings as a way to prepare yourself and begin evolving into a strategic planning conversation. Collect all the data. Most likely, you're going to see reoccurring themes, right? And guess what? Those reoccurring themes might become strategies. Make sense? Okay. All right. I am behind. I apologize. I want to give you 10 minutes to get some coffee, go to the bathroom. If you don't want a break, I don't need a break. But I'll let you have a break. Once you're return to your seats, then I'll start again, and we've got just about another hour and 15 minutes. How are you guys doing? Learning anything? Cool. So I know we have a couple people that are still wandering around. I wanted to do a quick check-in. So far, have you collected any applications beyond a strategic plan for strategic conversations? Yes? Do you have any methods to prioritize yet? You do? Couple? Do you right now have a way to determine better roles and responsibilities within a strategic planning process? Yeah. At least an understanding. Basics of strategic planning so far. We're getting there. We have not addressed community engagement to my understanding. To your understanding, is that true? We've talked about engaging others in the process. You've collected strategies there. We haven't really talked about ways to reinvigorate unless we're talking about quality conversation that guide how we talk about our work. So there's one strategy. Okay. Yay. So let's get into collecting data. Raise your hand if you love taking a survey. So the answer is no one. No one likes a survey. You can incentivize people taking surveys or coming to focus groups. Focus groups are going to give you far more quality data than a survey. Either way, if you want true engagement, you're going to have to pay for it. And this is an equity conversation. If you want people with lived experience to actually respond and talk about how they're interacting either in the community or within your organization and your mission, that is an expert knowledge base that you should pay for. Gift cards, cash, could be $10, it could be an hourly rate. But if you can afford it, you should. And that person will be far more likely to show up and give you their opinion if they're getting compensated for it. Okay? Talk to me about the difference in your mind between a stakeholder and a client. What is your definition of a stakeholder?
Someone that's invested.
So, invested with money?
Nope, invested with the organization.
They're more than just a client. They're the next step. They're more than just a patron. They want the organization.
They believe in the mission and they want the organization to succeed.
So, a stakeholder could be a volunteer, it could be a donor, it could be a funder, it could be an elected official, right? A stakeholder might not ever participate in your programs. In your case, you're an arts community, a stakeholder might never take a class, right? So you need to define and have different labels for that. From this group of stakeholders, what information do you want to know from them? It's a trick question. What information would a stakeholder give you? What data? So it is an appropriate conversation that if you have a group that's invested in you but don't experience you, why are you asking them for feedback? You can ask for a satisfaction survey. You can ask what experience they're hearing about in the community, but we need to be really careful about the questions that we're asking stakeholders because we're getting flawed data. They're invested, they already like us. You want a satisfaction survey from a stakeholder? It's going to be really high. It makes you feel really good. It's not real data. Right? So you've got to ask stakeholders the appropriate questions. Clients. What data could we extract from clients? People experiencing what we do.
From their perspective.
Absolutely. What barriers are we presenting, right? What impact are we having on them? Are we making it easier or harder for them to get any impact from our programs? What conversation should we have with those that are truly experiencing this? A survey probably isn't going to get you a lot with clients. You probably need to do some focus groups. What data would you extract from your financial trends? Huh? Solvency. You could, if the only way that this truly works is if your chart of account is the same year over year, right? But you could say, where are my expenses getting out of control and why? What income sources are decreasing or consistently stable, which means, you know, if I gave $10 a month in 2000, my $10 a month is about a negative $2 today, right? So what income sources have been completely flatlined and why, right? So when we look at our financial data and compare it year over year, what's the 5-year trend? What was it like pre-COVID? What was different about pre-COVID than now? What was the world like in 2017? What was the world like immediately after the housing crisis? What can we gain from learning the ratios? Certainly the dollar amounts are going to be very different, but the percentages and the ratios might tell us a lot. So we do have historical data to go back and say what happened in Trump's first term that might happen again. If you look at 2017, your organization might have been incredibly profitable, right? Or not. But you can learn a lot about the unknown by looking back. Like, we have a gift, right? We can go back in the unknown and go, that we've experienced some of this before, right? So we're looking at financial trends. We're looking at the trends of our client outcomes and our client population. What's different about the world that we exist in from a demographic status, from health outcomes, from social determinants in our community. We have a lot of census data. What do we know about what's been happening, and what do we need to know about the world around us that might influence our strategies, our goals, and our projected outcomes? So we can collect all of that. Some of it costs money. A lot of it is just time. I need somebody to evaluate, to run my reports. And then I need to understand when I'm looking at the disparities, what that financial data might tell me. Make sense? What other data might you want to collect?
Financial.
Sure.
Well, it's like program like implementation. If you are a nonprofit that can earn income from your program, seeing if the program is worth it.
Yep. There is I've shared this tool before, but you might want to Google the nonprofit profitability matrix. And this is a tool that discusses and helps you quantify the triple bottom line, which is how much money does this program cost or make? And what impact is that financial investment getting me, right? So some of us might have a program that's costing the organization. We're fundraising for this program because it's not generating any revenue, $200,000, $300,000. And then when we look at the impact of that program, it's not $300,000 worth, right? Like where that program is serving 10 people and those 10 people are not getting any better. We can make different decisions about how to utilize our resources when we start looking and comparing all that data.
Do you have any input? So I'm new to Michigan. I was a library director in Texas for 12 years before I moved back to home. And we did kind of like an in-house, survey and focus group, because with libraries, it's always like, who are the people that we're not beating that we're trying to get in? Do you have any advice on how to bring those focus group in of non-traditional users? Because generally when we would run surveys or focus groups, we get the people who are yeah, the stakeholders. I don't care. I already know you love me. Or we would get the people who are I really wish you would do this program. It was either great or complaint. So how do you when you're going out for focus groups or surveys, how do you breach that kind of oh,
That thing.
Partners.
Partners.
So your child care centers ask, well, those are hard because parents won't want to stay, but you could, food pantries, everyone in this room has a collection of clients that you could say, I will pay I will come to you, I will go to your facility. If you can collect a group of 6 to 8 people, I will pay them for their hour and I want to talk to them. You don't have to ask them whether or not they're current users, right? You're going into another environment, and most likely from a library perspective, maybe a literacy program, there might be some synergy there, but all these other areas, you could do the grant committee at the foundation, and I respect your time and I will pay for it if you can. Make sense? Okay.
I think that financial data, when you look at the data keys, it's very helpful because I don't know about others. They can speak, but in the nonprofit world, we have to art. Okay, not that the for-profit's artless, but I think he worked every day with populations and clients and programs that need us. And it's very hard to have that business data model when you have, a program and you're thinking, but it affected one child. And so we put a lot of resources in it, hard to pull the plug and say, he's not worth it, because it is worth it for that one individual, but our organizations can't exist for one-offs.
Well, I think the better conversation is, if this one person is only going to have the impact, how do we serve that person better, and it doesn't cost us $300,000 to make sure that this family got a couple of meals, right? We need to be way more efficient in our thinking. And somebody will say, "Oh, but that's a state grant that we get $300,000 for. How could we ever turn that away?" Well, you turn it away because all of this time, energy, effort, and all of our resources are going into a program that does nothing, which then from a strategic standpoint says all we're doing is existing to exist, not for any purpose or impact. That's a tough blow to the gut, right? And if we stop doing that and we wanted to have space for change, what else? What could we do with all of that? It's hard to give up money. It's easy to give up money that you're flushing down the toilet anyways.
You say, not every gift is a good gift.
Okay, so then other questions that we would ask. How many people are attending this program? We're doing this, and we know that when we ask a really hard question of the team that's going out to do the program, they're sitting in empty rooms. Or they're sitting with a person that showed up because they're their friend, and they're like, "I don't like it when she sits alone," right? Is it what we expected or planned? When we actually identify the ideal state of this activity, what was it and what is it? Are we measuring that impact? Are we measuring more than the number of people that walk through the door and accomplish the task? How can we measure the impact? Does the impact align with our mission? Go back to the start. When we really understand our mission, is this program getting us anywhere? Is dropping books off at a middle school really going to get us to middle schoolers who are inspired to learn and read, right? Are we getting there? How do we know? And then how much do we spend on this program? Are we actually fundraising to fund a program that's not doing anything? And if we continued to fundraise and not do this program, how would we spend those resources elsewhere? Okay? Okay. Now, more terminology. What's the difference between an operational plan and a strategic plan? An operational plan is done by the people doing the work, not necessarily your governors, right? So it's operational when you're talking about program efficiency. You know that it's operational when it feels like a staff meeting, right? It feels like micromanagement. That's an operational plan. A strategic plan is big goals, big themes, driving into a future desired state. Operational plans are critical. Many of you shouldn't have board members in an operational planning session. When we think about when we do this work, your board needs to be focused on strategies. The board blesses those strategies, given to the staff. The staff writes the goals to get to the strategies. Program staff or expert staff does the tactics to achieve the goals. Make sure the right people are in the right room. If you don't have any staff and it's all volunteer, again, you're the only person, right? Your board could say, make us financially stable. And you could say, okay, I am it. I am the only one. What am I going to do? What do I have capacity to do? Right? So we've got to, who is the right person? And sometimes I'm giving you permission that the right group is the right person. Doesn't have to be a committee. Unless that person needs thought leadership and somebody to bounce ideas off. And if that's the case, tell the group, it's my decision. I'm creating the plan. You're helping me brainstorm. That's a different conversation. right? And then me as a participant in that am no longer frustrated that we're not coming to any conclusions. I now know you're going to go off and make your own conclusions. I get to say whatever I want to say. Here's a grandiose plan, idea, whatever, but at least I'm not frustrated that all this stuff is getting thrown on the wall and we're not coming to a decision. Does that make sense? Okay. So I promised you that finance has to be in your strategic plan as a nonprofit. Let's talk about it. So here's what your strategic plan might look like. So if we need to be financially sustainable, I actually took this from a strategic plan that I just facilitated. Our strategy, we are going to secure sustainable sources of revenue to retain people, serve participants, grow programs, add capacity and space, and we are flexible and responsive. That was a 4-hour conversation to get to that value statement around that strategy. If we're going to generate more money, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to invest in? Retaining people doesn't have to be in your financial strategy. This organization said we need more money because we need to pay people better. Then let's say it so that when we get more money, we know exactly how we're going to spend it. We need more money because we're out of space and we need to build more programs. We have the capacity for programs. We don't have the space for programs. We need to get more space, right? So this strategy tells you exactly what the purpose of the finance goal is, correct? There's no question on what that money is going to be spent on. And there is a value in how those dollars are going to be spent. The goal, one of the goal of 4 goals underneath the financial strategy is we're going to control costs, right? We need more money. Income, expenses. Let's talk about expenses. We're going to assure efficient use of our resources and control costs, aiming to keep annual operation costs and personnel expenses at 20% of the total budget. That is a goal. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. SMART goal. And the tactic for this organization is we're going to manage program meal costs by assessing participant needs and providing appropriate level of services. Currently, this organization, anybody that walks through the door, it's a Meals on Wheels program for this particular tactic. Everybody gets the same thing. 7 meals, 7 days of meals, three meals a day. Well, what if I don't eat that much? That's a waste, right? This organization has decided that we can do that better and we can save costs. You see the methodology? So there are probably 7 or 8 tactics under this goal. There's about 4 different goals about how we're going to secure sustainable sources of income to spend on those things. See it? You can steal it. So this is a growth financial strategy, right? We need more money. Some of you might need to retain your growth, your financial status, right? Some of you are anticipating shrinking revenue, right? We're going to lose money and we need to figure that out. That would be your strategy. We need to do more with less. Questions? So, the board in this organization, because it's not a working board, the board is going to bless this strategy. That's exactly what we need to do. And we as a board understand that when we're passing budgets, we're going to see the impact of this strategy on every budget that and we also recognize that because of the goal and all the other goals, we're going to see that manifest into budget and financial controls. One of their other goals was an investment policy where they're going to be a little bit more risky in terms of their endowment proceeds so that they can get a better rate of return. That's a goal that must be blessed because that investment strategy is a policy driven by the board, but that's a goal. So everybody knows where their place is. Good? Okay.
A question about who's involved in that conversation. Is it just your Morse, or do you have your accountants,
So this organization, the staff are the experts, the board's appointed elected officials. The elected officials are like, I don't know. I know what my job is. My job is to provide oversight to you, right? So the staff and the board had conversations that led to strategy themes. The board said, we understand we need to be more financially secure. The staff, the leadership staff, came back with that strategy and said, let's have a deep conversation about these words. The board said, we agree with that. Blessed it.
The staff blessed by the board.
Yep. And now the board knows exactly how they're going to monitor that strategy over the next 5 years, because we're going to create a dashboard that says, hey, are we meeting 20% of the total budget, or is operations cost 21 or 25%? But if it's 15%, you can add more payroll costs, right? We've decided that 20% is our magic number. That's our goal. Now, what if you didn't have an advisory board, an elected board? What if the board had to come up with that strategy? You would have a whole deep conversation about the risks that the organization is undertaking because they can't retain or hire a good team, and how that's impacting the mission. When we go back to program delivery, when we go back to measuring our mission, we cannot accomplish these things because we're paying $17 an hour, and as soon as we get them in, they're out to a better job. And these people are direct care workers to the people that we're trying to help, right? And our people are suffering because we're not able to retain good staff. Everybody understands that. Great. What are we going to do about it? Okay? And we also have a hiring strategy. But let's talk about the dashboard first. So, in this strategy, this one, I call it the sandwich. The other piece of it right now, this is an open-faced sandwich. Strategy, goal, tactic. The other piece of bread is, how do we know quantitatively that we've met this strategy? We have some goals that are measurable, but how are we measuring that strategy? This organization has said we are going to measure it because we have sustained and competitive compensation benefits that are adjusted annually. They're not, our compensation isn't flatlined. If we're keeping up, we're succeeding. We have expanded programs and necessary infrastructure. We know we have enough money to do that. And we have money and resources to respond to community circumstances and unforeseen needs. We have a slush fund, and we can use it when things go south. They can measure the strategy, and all of the goals will point them in that direction, and all the tactics will achieve the goals. A strategic plan. All right. So some of you, if you're doing your own strategic plan and cannot generate the strategies on your own, here's some suggestions. I probably have done in my 25, 30 years of strategic planning, probably 30 to 40 strategic plans a year. Low-hanging fruit, okay? You need to either grow or sustain your programs for deeper impact. You have to decide what is that you need to do. You need to support staff. The only way our missions are met is by people, and we need good people, right? You probably need to have a hiring and retention strategy to achieve your mission. You probably need to build internal infrastructure, board governance, policy development, succession planning. You probably need financial sustainability. You probably might at some point need a capital or facility expansion or maintenance plan. And or if you're struggling or want to, as a growth strategy, you would talk about strategic restructuring your partnerships. Right? So you could start there. Which ones of these are really important to us? How would we prioritize this? And then how would we define the true meaning of this word? So if we were going to have program growth or expansion, you'd look at all the data that you'd collected and you would say, we need a different program model. We need to revisit that. And you could start there. So this is a cheat sheet if you don't want to go through an entire process where you would lift themes. Here's some themes that a lot of organizations will find in their process. Does that make sense? And does that resonate? Again, we're looking for specific, everything is tested. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, relevant, and time-based. Test every goal. Smart goals, not smart strategies. Smart goal. Test everything. Is it specific enough? Do we know when we've won in this goal? If you can't, then go back and rewrite the goal so it's more specific. Is it measurable? Do we know that we've won? Is there some measurable component of the goal so that we can be sure, no question, whether or not we've met the goal? Is it realistic? Is it achievable? Can we actually get there? This is a question that most likely your staff has to answer. Your board could come up with draft goals that need to be affirmed by the staff. If the staff are in the room, you've got to look at the staff and go, is that achievable? Can we do that? Really think about that. What would need to change about the work that we're doing in order to make this goal achievable? Relevant, will it get us there? If we go back to our mission achievement, if we go back to our impact, desired impact, will we get there? And then do we have a time-based, a calendar that says we're going to get there by this date? Okay, more examples. Here's a strategy. Same organization. We will retain, hire, and support a highly qualified team that passionately serves our participants and embraces our mission and culture. That's the strategy. Desired outcome. We will measure this by every position will have an ample number of qualified candidates. Unplanned and voluntary staff departures will decrease. We offer competitive compensation and benefit package. Employees are satisfied with their positions and all employees have a professional development plan in place. That's how we're going to measure success. But what are the goals? So goal number 1, ensure that every employee has an active, tailored professional development plan that aligns with their current goal, encourages career progression, enhances job efficiency, and increases overall job satisfaction. The tactics, how are we going to do that? We have a list. We need a menu of options for professional development opportunities that our employees can pick from. We need to train supervisors to make sure that the match is being done correctly. We need to create a tracking and evaluation system to make sure that the people who have a plan are accomplishing their plan. And we need to create an infrastructure and communication tools to manage the professional development system. You want it? Steal it, right? But you got to test it. Is this achievable for you? Because some of you are like, we don't have an HR department. Okay, guess what? It's specific, it's measurable, it is not realistic. Okay?
You know, and what staff does this. I've been using my board for the HR
help. And I guess I just wondered, like, if you get a board member that's an HR person,
you could employ them, not David, but after the this, and they can.
Yes, yes. I want to jump to, so there's another sample of the goal. It's in your handout. So one of the things that we have to acknowledge is the evolution of our organization. And so this is the gradient. You have to know whether or not you're a working board or a governing board. And unless you can say you're governing all day long, but if you don't have the staff infrastructure to support a governance process, you're not just a governing board. You can want to be a governing board that doesn't work, but you're not. So unless you have an organization that's fully staffed with the appropriate expertise that your organization needs to function, you are a working board, okay? And most organizations, there's 2 million in the United States, 90% of them have a working board. Unless you have a CFO, you are a working board. Okay? So acknowledge that you could be anywhere over here, but very few are actually just governing boards. Again, I appreciate that you want to be a governing board. I do. Probably not, right? So you need content experts on your board that are willing to do some of the specific activities that your organization requires, like financial management, like HR, sometimes like facilities. But you have to acknowledge where you are in this gradient, and every single element of your organization might be identified at a different stage. You could have a full maintenance team. Take the facilities committee off your plate. You have paid staff that doesn't necessarily need to be micromanaged. Make sense? So your strategic planning process could be a way that you reaffirm your governance committee structure. So do you have the appropriate working committees to achieve your strategic objectives? Some of you have a full program team, and yet you still have a governance committee called programs. What are they doing? Besides micromanaging and listening, but they're not actually informing or providing any true oversight. It's unnecessary. But we haven't acknowledged our evolution and changed our committee structure to support who we are now. We're still operating as if we were 10 years ago. Our bylaws still mandate a committee that is no longer necessary. So you're going to double back on all of your strategies and your goals when you look at an HR goal of retaining, doing competitive wage practices, all of those things, and go, we don't have the staff to do that. Is it appropriate for a board member to take on a volunteer task, or do we need a volunteer committee? And is that committee required to have board members staff that committee, or should the committee be staffed by ad hoc volunteers externally? Like, what's the org structure that is truly necessary for our organization? Allow your strategic plan to guide that. Here's a sample org chart. So, board of directors, executive director, and staff. Sometimes we create a governance committee called facilities. It's not a governance committee, really, unless this committee is managing bids and signing contracts and creating an infrastructure that the executive director doesn't have it's truly governance. Sometimes a facilities committee is a group of volunteers that will actually clean out the corners and change the filters. That volunteer committee should report to the executive director. Changing filters is not a governance job. It could be staffed by board members, but the chain of command and who's authorizing and supervising that work needs to be appropriate. This might be your burnout problem. Make sense? Okay. Questions about this? Promise?
I look at that because one of the pieces that has been very successful for our strategic plan, and might say it's delving into a little bit of an operations plan, but as we're putting it together, you are outlining it. We have a column that says who's going to implement it. So it's very intentional assigned. So at the end of the day, everything says executive director, not assignable. And then we will say if it's a committee, if it's the board, if it's volunteers or an ad hoc committee, so that it really says is there a plan balance? And
Yes.
so that achievable.
And whose role and responsibility is it? I think it's okay if there isn't a lot. I mean, typically some boards are like, we just provide oversight to this plan. Okay, then we get into the committee structure and we start assigning tasks. It's the executive director and the finance committee. It's the executive director and an ad hoc group of community-minded professionals that are going to solve this problem, right? We begin to acknowledge a different structure versus the structure that we currently have. And the whole point of this conversation is that that you need a system and a structure that will support your strategic plan and getting it done. If you don't change your structure to meet your strategic plan, your strategic plan will be unsuccessful.
We intentionally had that identified when we planned your
Yep. I'm going to pause one more second because for some of you, you're still processing this and you just had this whole sinking gut feeling of, that's our problem. We never ever rethink our committee structure. And now oh, I see it. I see it. Anybody want to process?
I get that's how I lock board numbers. I said everybody had to be on a committee and work.
Yeah. And so if you have like upon reflection, having the strategic plan that would have made that very obvious to them, like maybe they would have stayed engaged, right? And it's okay that I want to be on the facilities committee. That's what I like to do. And the facilities committee is no longer necessary. I don't know my place or my role. Can I just volunteer for the facility? Can I go weed the gardens? Yes, you can weed the gardens. You don't have to be a board member to weed the gardens. Good?
It's also helpful.
So you had it in place. That's part of your board number. That you have a document to say this is our strategic plan. This is outlining our work.
Yes.
And see whether they fit or don't fit in wanting to participate.
I think you've said a word that I didn't actually put in the slide deck, which is once your strategic plan has been approved, you have to train and orient everyone ongoing, repetitively on the strategic plan and how it functions within your organization. Your strategic plan is part of your board orientation and your staff orientation process. Where are you, staff member, in this plan, and what are your expectations and what are you working toward? And do you see how it fits in the entire picture?
That was gonna be something I was gonna ask about is, but once you have your plan, do you have any concrete? How do you keep bringing up lab, or how do you make sure other is still up work? We had a master plan, and I think for the first 2 years out on the board, I was I went, Dottie, swear sure the chairperson you and I, you in the back, but
I'll come back to this. So, your tangible ideas are that your board agenda actually follows your strategic plan. Like the agenda item is this strategy, and we're going to talk about progress or actions related to the goals. And every board agenda is designed around your strategic initiatives, nothing else. If it doesn't follow the strategic plan, it can be an offshoot, it can be a document, it can be a minor discussion point. But if it doesn't why are we talking about it at the board level if it's not in the strategic planning process? So you add those elements, those are your agenda items, are your strategies, and how the topic connects to your goals. You could include reminders Many of you might include your mission on the top of your agenda. You might type out your values, add your strategies as reminders. This is what we're doing, right? The executive director report the same way. There is no topic that is just randomly in the executive director report. It falls under the strategies. The strategies are the subject headings, right? What did the executive director do to accomplish the strategic plan in the last month? Everything is designed around the strategic plan. You might incorporate a committee, a strategic oversight committee, that's monitoring the progress and reporting back to the board on barriers or successes, and that they actually have an objective to achieve the strategic plan. They're not doing it, they're monitoring it, but there's a committee that's managing and elevating issues to the board. And then you have your staff meetings that are equally aligned to the strategic planning strategies. Why are we talking about it if it's not getting us there? And so if at the staff level, if we have a human resources component to our strategies and we're noticing a lot of turnover, we will recognize from the staff meeting, we need to talk about staff turnover and what's occurring, right? That's how our staff meetings would run. Program departmental conversations, right? Their only discussion item would be the goals or the tactics, but you see how you could just infiltrate it everywhere? Good tips? Okay. So here's an example of that. So this is a grassroots organization. This is their agenda. They have full definitions, but their first strategy is program delivery. We need to get better programs out to more people. So there's the 2024 program planning and then a support group update. We have an advocacy. So Sharon's executive director report was that she went to the state capitol, and her advocacy efforts are included in there. Understand the needs of our community and preserve our organizational stability, which is our organizational infrastructure. So that's how this agenda was designed to follow that organization's strategic plan. Like it or no? Hate it? Okay, so going backwards. So I want you to have a small group conversation about how your strategic plan, your strategies might inform your structure. Everything from your staffing structure, like if you're realigning your programs, your organizational chart, your governance structure, spend a good 5 minutes talking about how your strategic plan could inform these elements. Just 5 minutes. So, what observations have you been making? What observations have you had? Are you making? Are you connecting?
One of the things we talked about, and I think this is a national trend all over about volunteerism, but I think when you're in a rural community such as ours, I'm looking around, I know everyone, we all share board members. Some of them are here on multiple boards, and that's difficult. You're filling committee structures and getting that commitment, and so it's finding those untapped community resources.
Or those other expertise. Those a trade-off, and we're all trying to do the same.
So, when you have resources, financial resources, remember that there is a huge difference between an employee and a contractor for a specified amount of time, right? So when we're trying to get work done, we don't have to commit to a salary. We can commit to getting a smaller project done. Policy review, like you want it done in less than 6 months. hire somebody to do your policy review and give you revisions and lead your board through conversations to get those types of things done. It is a lot of work. And when we get to hiring the right person to help you, even through a strategic planning process, you need to know thyself so that you can hire the person that's going to lead you through a plan that works for you. Many consultants and facilitators have a one-trick pony, and you are not a one-trick pony, right? And so you need to really have somebody that will help you and say, listen, we can't do a Saturday, right? We need to do this during board meetings. And we understand that we are going to sacrifice speed for a quality product because we can't do it in a single day. Your consultant should be able to accommodate those things, but we'll get to that slide. What else are you observing? What else are you noticing? What else are you being made aware of? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what you got with your plan ain't not necessarily that planning really analyze it. Who we are, where to go, or how to get there, like what we're doing now may not be what we're saying.
Yep. And a program or a department could have its own strategic plan. Needs to be in alignment with the large organizational plan, but we could do the micro planning sessions that kind of fill in, like lead up to, hey, all of our programmatic and our organizational conversations have led to the fact that we can't do anything without getting more money. So we need a strategy that talks about and gets us more financial resources to do the things we need to do. And to pass a budget where the board now understands these intricacies and these complexities about getting the mission done, right? Like it could be a ground to ceiling process versus a ceiling to ground process. Your consultant or your facilitator, again, needs to accommodate your internal issues and uniquenesses. One more. What else are you observing? What are you aware of at this moment?
Need the board to do more.
You need people to do more, right? So again, when we think about our committee structure and our organizational structure, many times, and you're an executive director, right?
Yep.
So we speak a language that we're actually not necessarily wanting to speak. We think a board member has to do the things they don't, right? Can we find or again subcontract somebody to get some more things done? Is the committee, are we recruiting for the appropriate committee structure? But sometimes we get tunnel vision and say all things go through the board, and I'm telling you they don't.
Oh no, they trust me on that one. That's part of the life cycle, right?
Yes.
We've grown, and as our resources have expanded, one example is we need to redo our employee handbook. I am not an HR person. The board can't pay me enough time
Yes.
to be knowledgeable of not getting us in trouble.
Yes. Yeah.
Part of our strategic plan and board allocation of resources is we are going to hire out to a firm that can get us an employment where we need.
The question is, are we using resources efficiently? And when you think about your hourly rate and your skill set, your current skill set, we could pay you for 6 months to revise a handbook. That isn't going to be right, right? So we have to, and that's the board down, where the board is coaching the executive director to make better decisions and go, you can spend $500 to have your employee handbook rewritten. Spend $500 and spend 1 minute of your time. Okay. So I have 2 topics left, and then I want to open it up to conversations. We have gotten into the rut that all communication is on a thing like this, piece of paper. When we design our strategic plan, We need to identify what tool will actually work for us. And maybe it's not a Word document, maybe it's a website with multiple links. Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet with multiple pages. But in designing a tool that will work for us, if we go back to why didn't that strategic planning process help us, it's because we were given a Word doc that I can't do anything with. I don't know how to apply it to our current infrastructure or organizational tools. So this question about what it looks like at the end and how you will actually use it, what is the outcome? Not only an engaged board, but a tool that's useful. Tell me what else is useful what are the tangible things? Some of you use tools like Quip or Slack or Salesforce or a website or whatever, but how are you going to use it? What does it need to be in its tangible form so you can track and keep it present? And if it's a document if it's a binder on somebody's shelf in your office, at work, when you're virtual, like, let's think through the whole thing and how it's going to show up for you. So, is it a brochure? Is it a book? You can go to Shutterfly and have a book printed, right? Like, what is it going to look like for you? Does it need to be pictures? Does it need to be interactive? Is it a whole bunch of videos talking about how these things apply? Think about the use of it so that at the end, you actually have something that's useful, informative, guiding. Questions about that? Okay. Now, let's talk about the purpose of a neutral convener, a neutral facilitator. Executive directors, you can't do this process. It is too hard for you to manage and participate. So one, my advice to you is if you want someone to actually inform and participate in the process, they cannot be your facilitator, your consultant through the process. Okay? Because that person can either manage the process or inform a conversation. It's really, really hard to do both. You can get another executive director to do it. You could get a board member that has a lot of experience that serves on another board, and they could lead you through the process if you don't have funds to pay someone. But no one internally, staff, executive director, or board member can do the strategic plan. Don't try. So one question when we're talking about who should facilitate your plan, some of you might say, I need a content expert. I need somebody who knows how to do forensic interviewing to actually do the strategic plan. What you're asking for is for that expertise to be infiltrated into your strategic plan and into your organizational structure. And I want you to challenge yourself on that. Because you have experts. Like if you wanted a program evaluator, hire a forensic interviewer to do a program outcome plan. Many of you simply need someone that will go through the methodical steps of inviting a conversation and leading you to consensus and a decision, and have a methodical way to do that, which would be a facilitator, right? So this conversation is just simply this, who is the best person to serve us? Hopefully you're walking away with anybody who's not going to listen to me and design me a process that works for me is not your facilitator or your consultant. You need someone that will customize their approach to exactly who you are right now and where you want to arrive at. Does that make sense? Okay. And so, interviewing, right? So here's, I think a lot of organizations try to do the RFP approach. Like, here's exactly what we want, and we want to be able to compare apples to apples. So if we tell you that we're going to have a day-long retreat, one meeting follow-up, we want one focus group, tell me what that costs, right? That's one approach so that I know who's giving me the best deal. I think that oftentimes fails because if I get those RFPs as a strategic planning facilitator, I'm like, yeah, but what is that really what you need? You haven't talked to me yet, right? I haven't listened to you, and you haven't actually told me your structure and what your outcomes are. And maybe what you want and what you're speaking is an operational plan, and I do that differently. So part of me is like, okay, I'm going to submit an RFP so that you can see the apples to apples. When I finally do the interview, when I'm invited to do an interview, I'm going to be like, can we throw out your RFP? Like, if you want me, let me tell you how I do it versus how you told me you wanted me to do it. So some part of the RFP is we simply want interested consultants who would be willing to work with us, and then an interview process to scale down those consultants, and then say, okay, you just gave me a process, send me a price for that. And somehow you're getting a design of a process that will work for you, and you're comparing those versus the price. That's scary because you got a budget, right? But that this is what we're willing to spend, this is what we have to spend, should be part of that interview. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
I think that's really like. So I've been thinking about this because our strategy last couple years had a date when we did it. So like I just like set up some phone calls with some like just organizations, just like tell me what you're about. It was really interesting when different like responses you got. Like one group that I really like because they're like, we'll come in and we'll kind of like gauge in this and that because they're asking me and I'm like, I'm not a strategic planner. I don't know what the hell I need. Like, I know this is where I'm trying to get to, but do I need 32 focus groups? Do I need 5? So it was really interesting in having those conversations with different just strategic planners that are out there.
Yep.
Of how they approach the whole process.
Yep. And it has to be a dialogue because, again, if you're coming to tell me that your board is totally in love with you as an executive director and will do absolutely anything you want them to do, right? There's a lot of those dynamic leaders that their board is just happy that there's no drama, and they're just like, we come to meetings and they're really well run, and like, I'm excited about everything that we're doing, but I have no idea what's next, right? And I need my executive director to give me my innovative ideas. I don't have any on my own, right? That is a completely different strategic planning process than a brand new executive director that is very new in their field and a seasoned board that's like, this is where we want to go, and we need an executive director that will take us there. Very different process. And those types of interview questions from the consultant are critical. You should be asked, tell me where you are in your life cycle. Tell me how engaged your board is. Tell me the relationship that you have with your board and whether or not it's crisis and tension filled, because that's a different strategic planning process as well, right? Like, how long have you been in your position? How engaged is your board? Tell me about your staff. All of those things matter in order to get you the plan that you need. So, you need a good listener. Most likely you need a guide, but not a lead, right? The people in the room will actually do the leading. I need a guide that's going to allow me to, when do I need water? Are we on the right step? A paraphraser that's going, this is what you just said. Is this what you wanted to say? Is this a consensus item where we can plant a flag here and go, this is a mile marker, right? And somebody that's trusting the expertise that you currently have in the room and not trying to overtalk you. Those would be what I would be looking for you. Okay. 5 minutes left. Whoo! How'd we do? Are you smarter?
Yes.
What's the question? So you said we should not write our own gender. Physically, that is it now? Then what?
So I think that for a grassroots new organization, is that what you are? Yeah. You have a design in your head. You are the founder of the organization. You probably have invited your friends to join you in this effort. No friends? I did it perfectly. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yep. So you're a little unique because sometimes in a very brand new fresh organization, having your friends who you can tell what to do and they'll do what they want to do because you said, "Listen, come over to my house, we'll do this and I'll give you a glass of wine afterward." They're like, "Oh, that sounds like fun." Right? That's very different than what are we doing, right? So in your specific position, you are outlining your business plan and your methodology for why this organization is even necessary. You probably are the only one that knows that. And so from a dynamic leader position, the kind of conversation that the board will follow you, the board just needs to know their marching orders. You become educator of that design. I have a strategic planning process that I have used in the past with really dynamic leaders, where you become a witness to a jury, and you stand there and say, "Ask me questions. What questions do you have? What don't you understand?" And I am here, and I will not leave this chair until you have a full understanding of this design that's in my head, right? And the ramifications to the budget and the ramifications to programming and the impact. Like you're testifying to why your organization is relevant and necessary. That is an okay strategic plan, because in my mind, it's more like a business plan startup than really a true strategic plan after you get going. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
In planning, trying it out. So, yeah.
Is there like a range that we should expect to pay regular services? I mean, per week.
It's not free. So So, I don't know. This could be different in your community. If you're going to say, "I want a strategic conversation with my board on a Saturday morning, and I want to report an executive summary of some of the decisions that were made during that strategic discussion," that might cost you, between the prep work, maybe any surveys to the board around what they're thinking, the actual facilitation, and a report, maybe around $5,000. If you wanted focus groups and staff plans, tactics, the whole kit, caboodle, dog and pony, some plans would be 25 to 30,000, all encompassing, right? But a good facilitator would go, "Do you really need the kit and the caboodle? Like, why would you spend that money? What's your outcome?" They'd ask you your budget size. They'd ask you your intentionality, like what's prompting you. You have a strategic readiness assessment on your table. So just be careful that would be how much it would cost. But do you need to spend that to get what you need, right? Watch for consultants that are in for it for the money. Other questions? Yes.
So, questions about board. So my board is appointed, so by governmental. So right now, I have a very dynamic. We get along pretty well. Or that may not be the case in 25. How do you, when doing a strategic plan where everybody on your board may not be like in favor of your organization, how do you kind of mitigate
damage control on that? Is it good to do a strategic plan, or should you just like do strategic plan light, like Nancy said, where you're like,
I think there's a couple of dynamics that that any organization like needs to consider. If your board has very short term limits, right? 2 years in and out, um, uh, el- elected board members. So part of the conversation you need to have with your board is if you're doing a 5 or 10-year strategic plan and your board members are only there for 4 years, that you need to really guide that with a lot of data about what that data is leading you to do, and to give you flexibility within like when that data changes, what happens, right? Because that the data is if we create a strategic plan on emotion, done, right? I feel, I want, right? Instead of the data that's really guiding us toward those decisions, you need to track almost like an appendix of all the data that you use to make this decision so that you can train and make sure that it can roll forward. That would be my advice. And your board, hopefully, if you've developed some really good relations with them, will trust your leadership and your expertise. Yes, ma'am.
We need to work on board recruitment. Would you suggest waiting till we feel like we're full-rounded before we even think about it?
I think that's a chicken or an egg, right? Because you could decide that based on your current composition, you do not have the innovators on your board right now that will lead you to a truly innovative plan. And so depending on the resources that you have, you might need to recruit some visionaries and some creative thinkers. Okay. Please don't leave. Oh, I've got final thoughts. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, your budget is a form of a strategic plan. Macro and micro planning for programs and events are strategic plans. Fundraising strategies, that's part of your strategic plan, could be a strategic plan in and of itself. You've got your committee purposes that need to guide, like lead into all of that. And you can use strategic planning as within your departments, all again, ceiling down, floor up, whatever you'd like. And I forgot to print evaluations, and Nancy really, 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 really likes those, and so do I, because I use it in my planning practices. So if you could pull out your phone and do the QR code so that I can give Nancy feedback about whether or not this was worthwhile for you.